This is about making small analog gear. So, analog gear back in the 80s, when electrical engineering evolved, they started making smaller and smaller and more affordable analog gear. And that's what the big change in the sound in the 80s was, is that the transistor, I guess. I think it's a transistor that changes the size, changes the sound and the size in the 80s mostly. And but anyway, they start using 80s components. They start using 80s analog components. And Neve, who's a legendary audio maker at the time, starts using cheaper components. And this is where they cheapen their sound. They use cheaper components and they cheapen their sound. And normally you wouldn't have an idea to go in this direction, but I say we continue going in this direction. Like they lost out against SSL because SSL had a better sound with those types of components than Neve had with those types of components. But I say that you still evolve those types of components and work on making even smaller and smaller analog components and and using them and building products that use them. So it's just like how in the 80s the analog gear got smaller and you could start getting it into your household now and it wasn't taking up a full studio room or whatever. It was like feasible to have your own analog mixers and stuff like that. I think mixing now is pretty. Well, I guess we got some small digital ones. Some digital ones. We have some small ones with some I/O. But the idea would be to make a fully functional mini analog mixer that sounds really good still, and then go back and start making things like transformers and stuff. Like maybe use high frequency electricity, so you can make smaller transformers, more affordable transformers, smaller transformers, and maybe use it in an AC circuit, because that's where it actually would apply. The frequency of electricity would actually apply to an AC circuit. It doesn't apply to a DC circuit. DC frequency is 0 or 1 or whatever you want to call it, full, on, or off. And AC is alternating at a frequency. So, but you know what I mean? Where we had the revolution in components in the 80s, I think we could have another revolution in components, and as well as not just making them sound cheaper, making them sound smaller and cheaper, but making them sound smaller and better and bigger, smaller and bigger at the same time, and like get the hang of the get the hang of what components do to your sound. Get a hang of what types of analog components does what type of thing to your sound. If you change it for a smaller, cheaper one, or if you change it for a bigger, more expensive one, what does it actually do to your sound? What's the difference that you're getting there? And of course, you have to always remember to mix. You can't just do sound comparisons. You have to do a full song and mix the full song to compare. Like that's your comparison is the two different mixes. It's not because you can't really hear the difference between a preamp and a preamp. Like it sounds like you, like, but when you mix a track with that preamp and then you mix a track with the other preamp, you hear a pretty big difference. You hear a pretty big difference between the preamps when you do a full track. So to hear those subtle differences, you do things like mix some, add effects. Maybe you can do some things where you add effects and analog and digital effects and can pair the signal chains that way. But okay, so this is an idea to have another electronic revolution for mini analog parts. Then you can make like a micro mini mixer, like a little boutique portable analog console, like mini transformers or a mini multi-channel transformer or and a whole bunch of mini channels with analog EQs and stuff and maybe some analog compressors. The other thing I was thinking is, the SSL Oracle that came out where it's a fully automated console. Wouldn't it be cool if that thing controlled those X racks? you could buy extracts and just plug them into that console, and they'll be controlled remotely by the console. You can add more channels to your console. You could add more EQ. You could add compression. So that console doesn't have compression though. So to add 8 channels of compression, you have to do the 500 series that they have out now, which isn't appealing. It's not nearly as appealing as maybe the X-Track might have been. But if you have controllable X-Racks, and then you have third-party manufacturers doing the X-Rack, as well as being able to put things in the X-Track like a 500 series, then you could have like a fully automatable working area where all your different manufacturers have automatable products in your console. This is some of the most common and so valuable assessments that you will do in clinical practice. The other thing we were thinking about was the patch bay. Like, basically, you need a digital patch bay to make everything controllable by a console. If you want everything automatable and controllable by a center section and by a console, like where you can control all the EQs in the center section, or you control all the compressors in the center section, or you control all the inserts in the center section, and then you control all their functionality. You don't just control the hardware insert on and off. We're talking about now having control of an 1176 compressor, or a distressor compressor, or an LA2A compressor, having control of the controls and being able to automate them, or not automating them is probably not going to be too well. It's probably going to be pretty special, but being able to control them, being able to set and control them from the center section of your console. So you plug them into these X-Track logics that the console controls, and now it can control your hardware inserts. Well, actually, now it can control your units. It can control your units, and what we're saying is have a digital patch bay. Well, this is where I'm actually coming up with a new idea here, where you have one digital patch bay for the X-Track units, where you can control the unit as well as its insert point. And then you have another digital patch bay for all the old analog units. So now you can insert your analog units directly from the console digitally. You don't have to hook them up to a channel. You can sound design and switch which channels. You can pick the channel and the insert and patch it into your console digitally. Now, there's a couple companies that make digital consoles or digital patch bays. Digital patch bay is a new thing. It's a new thing that would make this really work, where you could control everything from the console and just digitally patch in any compressor that you want. That's what it is. You're digitally patching in any compressor that you want. You don't have one hardwired. You're picking whichever one you want. Maybe you're doing some sound design. You're picking 5, wiring in 5 compressors to this insert point. And so with the digital patch bay, there's a couple companies that make them. Flock Audio makes a digital patch bay, and then Wolf Audio makes a digital patch bay. And the thing with Wolf is that he used to work at API, and he also makes his own console. He also makes his own Wolf console. He used to do Tonelux too, I think. Tonelux is his other company in API. But with his Wolf console, like, you have to argue maybe SSL is a little bit ahead with the digital console, where you can control everything. But if Wolf puts his console and his patch bay together, that's like center section console control of everything. He just needs to make a digital console so you can control all the compressors and all the EQs and all the auxiliaries right from the center section. So what we're looking at is the new Genesis console, and what they have is a digitally controlled console. You buy analog gear and you plug it into there. So that's where the X-Track comes from. Is if you had something like the new Genesis, where you could plug in more analog gear plug in the compressors and control the compressors. And then we're looking at the SSL Oracle console, which is automated or a fully remote controllable automatable console where it recalls. It's a console with total recall, but it turns the knobs. You don't have to go back. You don't have to set it according to a mark. It turns the knobs for you, so it totally resets. It's totally like a digital console this way, that you can put scenes and settings and recall the scenes and settings. You can create a channel strip for a snare drum, and then you can create another one for a snare drum and another one for a snare drum, and then you can look and pull up between one of the three snare drums that you want to call upon your channel strip. It's like a real digital analog console. And then the other things we're looking at is the digital patch bays, so you can patch in your analog gear, but maybe taking it further to like a rack where it's controllable, or a rack where you can now control it from a console, where it sends out between one cable control from the console. The other thing that these racks can do is add channels to the console. So say you have 24 channels and you want to add 8 more channels, you can buy a rack, and it comes with 8 channels, and then you put 8 more components in there, or whatever, 8 or 10 components in there, and they're all remotely controllable from the console, and patchable from the console. Fully patchable and remote controllable. This way you have like a totally automatic studio, which you can control from a center section, where you can do like absolutely everything from just the center section. From just like a USC one or something, you can do absolutely everything if you wanted to. The thing with the SSL Oracle is it's a 9000J console. It's 9000J duality console, so it's actually a pretty sweet mixer under the hood. That's what you don't realize, is that the SSL mixer is actually a really, really good mixer. Yeah. The summing isn't. Well, summing is kind of special. Summing's wicked. The summing's wicked, but the mixer itself is the best part. It's got that kick drum. It, like, invented the kick drum for modern music, that SSL console. And it's got the Dr. Dre 9000J. Metallica's got that console. Exactly. A lot of people have that console. So it's the new console. But this is where you take that console and maybe go a bit further and have a fully automatable, remote controllable studio space that you can control from a center section. So that's the idea there. And maybe you could build it with mini mixers. Maybe you could build a mini micro analog, micro integrated circuits. Yeah, you could use integrated circuits and bring a micro analog console or studio environment to fruition as well. Fully remote controllable studio environment to fruition. The size of a book, the size of a book or an iPad. Have compressors and EQs and reverbs and all analog and integrated circuits, and exactly have an analog summing mixer and analog transformers, or a multi-channel transformer for all your transformer needs, etc. Yeah. All right.